Hey, folks, welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio. Now, New Mexico is a place where ancient landscapes, indigenous traditions, military secrecy, and unexplained phenomena seem to intersect. Now, beyond the familiar stories surrounding Roswell, the state contains vast areas of isolated desert, rugged mountain wilderness, volcanic terrain, abandoned structures, military installations, and highways that stretch for miles beneath some of the darkest skies in North America. Now, for generations, witnesses throughout New Mexico have reported strange lights, unidentified aerial objects, bizarre humanoids, winged beings, invisible entities, underground encounters, and creatures that seem impossible according to conventional biology. Now, some of these incidents occur near well-known locations such as Roswell, White Sands, Holloman Air Force Base, and Los Alamos. And others take place far from the tourist destinations, in remote areas where witnesses may have no immediate access to assistance and little expectation that anyone will believe in. So tonight, we'll examine 9 extraordinary reports from across the land of Enchantment. These accounts involve a massive winged humanoid clinging to an electrical pole near Hobbs, a mysterious doorway that appeared in a mountain trail, 2 screaming creatures stalking teenage campers near Cloudcroft, a whistling blue-eyed humanoid encountered by police officers, transparent figures near Holloman Air Force Base, an apparent reptilian entity beneath an extinct volcano, a winged creature in Rio Arriba County, and an anomalous ball of light near Roswell, as well as a towering insectoid observed near Valles Cadera. These are the mysteries of Unexplained New Mexico. Now, this first report occurred during the early morning hours of September 2018. The witness lived near the New Mexico-Texas border and regularly drove to Seminole, Texas for work. Now, because the witness needed to open the workplace at 6 a.m., they normally leave home at approximately 4:30 a.m. The route took them along Route 214 and Route 3306 before reaching the Seminole Highway. So the witness stated, "I'm writing this based on something I witnessed on my way to work one morning in September 2018. I prefer to remain anonymous." Now, I live near the state line of New Mexico and Texas and left my home at 4:30 a.m. to head to my job in Seminole, Texas, where I needed to open at 6 a.m. The drive takes about 30 minutes, and I typically take Route 214 and Route 3306 all the way to Seminole Highway. This morning has stuck with me. As I turned onto Route 3306, about a mile down the road, I noticed a prominent figure. I slowed down because it seemed odd to see a person on an electrical pole so early in the morning. However, as I got closer, I saw no truck or any sign of someone working on the pole. That's when I realized the figure was a huge man crouched over with large black feathered wings extending down its back and bony spine between them. Its head was bent toward its chest. I didn't look back. After receiving the initial report, I contacted the witness and obtained additional details. The sighting occurred near Hobbs, New Mexico, in an area containing numerous crude oil pumps and related industrial equipment. Now, according to the witness, the dark-winged humanoid had grasped the electrical pole near its top. The wings were feathered and appeared exceptionally large. The body itself looked membranous, hairless, or bare. The head was small and round, but the witness could not identify any facial features. The total body length was estimated at approximately 8 to 9 feet. The witness is of Navajo heritage and said their grandfather had described a similar winged being. Now, according to what the witness has been told, the being could represent a form assumed by a skinwalker and was considered malevolent. The witness was also aware of previous reports involving large flying creatures in the area. However, they believe that many of these earlier sightings may have involved unusually large birds or possibly thunderbird-type creatures. Now, the entity observed on the electrical pole appeared humanoid and did not resemble an ordinary bird. The witness remained extremely concerned about ridicule and requested complete anonymity. The location of the encounter is approximately 50 miles southeast of Roswell. The sighting raises several questions. Why was the being positioned near the top of an electrical pole? Was it simply perched there, or was there an interacting with the electrical infrastructure? The witness described a bony spine between the wings, bare or membranous wings, and a small featureless head. Now, these characteristics are significantly different from a conventional description of a large bird. The witness also had no expectation of seeing anything unusual that morning. They were following a normal routine, traveling a familiar route, and preparing for an ordinary workday. Instead, they encountered a massive winged figure crouched above the roadway before sunrise. Now, reports of winged humanoid beings are found throughout New Mexico in the greater Southwest, but not every unexplained encounter involves a creature. Now, some witnesses describe locations or objects that appear without explanation, produce altered states of perception, and then disappear completely. Now, our next report concerns a doorway found standing alone on a mountain trail. Now, the following incident occurred on a trail near Tortugas Mountain, close to New Mexico State University. The witness had walked the trail many times and was familiar with the surrounding landscape. The area contains old ruins, so the presence of stone fragments, stairways, and portions of abandoned structures was not necessarily unusual. However, the object blocking the trail that day was unlike anything the witness had previously encountered. The witness told me, "I found a standing doorway in the brush once. It was on a mountain trail near my campus on Tortugas Mountains near New Mexico State University. I had walked that trail probably a dozen times before, but I had never seen it. Something to note about this trail is that there are some old ruins nearby, so fragments of buildings, usually doorways or parts of stairs, were not uncommon. But this doorway was different. For a start, it was just a door frame and a door. There were no attached walls or ruins. In addition, the door seemed very modern. It was painted light green, and the doorknob was metal with a handle. It looked like an ordinary modern house door. Grass had grown around the bottom, implying that it had been there for a while. As I said, I had never seen it before, despite having walked that trail several times. I could not have missed it either. It was directly on the narrow trail and completely blocked the path. There was enough room to step into the grass and walk around it, but I was curious. Now, the door was slightly ajar, so I opened it fully. I had to drag it through the grass and dirt that had built up around the bottom of the door. Then I stepped through it. Immediately, something felt wrong. The best way to describe it is like a strong deja vu. Everything took on a weird dreamlike atmosphere, and I felt slightly outside my own body. The trail ahead looked the same, but everything flickered as though viewed through a heat haze. The colors appeared extremely saturated as well. The strange dreamlike feeling faded slightly, and then I was overcome by a sudden feeling of dread. I quickly stepped back through the doorway. Immediately, everything felt normal. I looked through the doorway from where I was standing, and the trail appeared normal again. I closed the door and walked around it. Nothing strange happened during the remainder of the hike. I returned to the trail several more times, but never saw the doorway again. A lot of strange things are reported on that mountain. Now, the witness's description contains several notable details. First, the doorway appeared to have been standing on the trail long enough for the grass and dirt to accumulate around its base. Yet the witness had repeatedly traveled the same narrow trail and had never seen it before. Second, the doorway did not appear ancient or connected to any nearby ruins. It looked like a modern residential door with a light green surface and a metal handle. Third, stepping through it apparently produced an immediate perceptual change. The witness experienced intense deja vu, altered colors, visual flickering, and a dreamlike atmosphere, and a sensation of being partially outside the body. The effect ended as soon as the witness stepped back through the doorway. The door then disappeared before the witness returned to the trail. Stories involving mysterious doors, staircases, arches, and openings found in wilderness areas have been reported in many locations. In some accounts, the structures appear where no building should exist. Witnesses occasionally describe unusual silence, altered light, disorientation, missing time, or an overwhelming warning not to continue. Now, in this case, the witness did cross the threshold, but immediately retreated after experiencing the intense sense of dread. Now, whether the doorway represents an unexplained physical object, a temporary environmental anomaly, an altered state of perception, or something resembling a portal remains unknown. The witness did not describe missing time, physical energy, or continuing effects. However, the door's disappearance suggests that it was not simply an overlooked remnant from the surrounding ruins. Now, the doorway on near Tortugas Mountain appeared without explanation and vanished just as mysteriously. Now, our next report takes us into the mountains near Cloudcroft, where 3 teenagers camping away from their family's camper heard 2 massive creatures approaching their tent in the darkness. Now, the witness was born and raised in Roswell, New Mexico. Because of Roswell's reputation, the witness had grown accustomed to alien stories and generally approached strange claims with skepticism. However, an encounter during a family camping trip near Cloudcroft left the witness with no logical explanation. Now, at the time, the witness was 17 years old. He was camping with his cousin Cam, also 17, Cam's 13-year-old brother Nick, and their aunt and uncle. The family was staying in the Lincoln National Forest in a remote location that the witness's uncle had discovered. They were not using an established campground. The uncle had recently purchased a camper, but the 3 teenagers chose to sleep inside a tent approximately 60 yards away. So the witness tells me, "I'm from Roswell, New Mexico. I was born and raised there. I grew up dealing with alien nonsense my entire life. I'm a logical thinker and have experienced strange things in the past, but I always tried to explain them logically. What I am about to describe is something I cannot explain, and I'm hesitant to even think about it. We were camping near Cloudcroft in the Lincoln National Forest. My uncle had purchased a new camper, and we decided to camp there for the weekend. My cousins and I brought a tent because we wanted to sleep away from the adults. We placed the tent about 60 yards from the camper and the campground. At approximately 3 a.m., the fire was completely out, and my younger cousin Nick had fallen asleep, but Cam and I were still awake. We were talking and gradually beginning to fall asleep when we suddenly heard a blood-curdling scream in the distance. It seemed to come from about the same distance as the camper, but in the opposite direction. Cam and I both raised our heads and almost simultaneously asked, "What was that?" It was not a bear, it was not a fox, but it sounded big. The closest description I can give is a mixture between a banshee and a rabid peacock. The voice was deep and echoed through the forest. It screamed again, and then it began clicking. It produced a strange, deep clicking sound from the back of its throat. The clicking was loud enough to hear from a considerable distance. We were frightened and had no idea what it could be. We remained completely quiet. It screamed again, followed by another series of clicks. This time it sounded closer. I looked at Cam, and he appeared as shocked as I felt. I tried to convince myself it was a bird or a mountain lion. Then I heard it walking. It was walking on 2 feet. I could hear it distinctly. It sounded large and took enormous strides, breaking branches and crushing leaves beneath its feet. It was moving towards us. It screamed and clicked again. It seemed to be approximately halfway to the tent. Suddenly, we heard another scream and clicking from a different direction. It sounded just as close as the first creature. The second one sounded more aggressive, angrier, and more dominant. The first creature responded with another series of clicks. That was when I realized that they were communicating. Cam and I were terrified. I had brought an axe into the tent, but I was afraid to move. Then both creatures began walking towards us. They were both moving on 2 legs and were no longer screaming or clicking. It sounded like they were attempting to sneak toward the tent. The first creature suddenly screamed again. It was now approximately 15 yards away. The second creature answered with more clicking. I could hear both stepping on branches and leaves. I could feel the ground thudding with each step. I began searching for the axe while Cam attempted to wake Nick. I couldn't find it. Then I remembered that I left it near the campfire after we had used it to cut wood. Nick wouldn't wake up, and the creatures continued approaching. Eventually, Cam and I froze. The second creature stopped about 10 feet from the tent. The first one continued walking directly towards us. When it reached the outside of the tent, I yelled as loudly as I could, "Get away from here! Leave us alone!" It stopped. It was directly outside. I could almost see its outline through the tent. It was huge. It was tall enough to lean over and look through the top of the tent. I could tell that it was slim, humanoid, and heavy. I could feel its energy, and it was extremely negative. Whatever these creatures were, they were not there to say hello or steal our food. The moon had become covered by clouds, so there was no moonlight. I couldn't hear the creature breathing. I remained completely silent. The second creature clicked from behind us, still approximately 10 feet from the tent. The first creature didn't move. It was probably 1 foot away from the tent. My heart was beating so hard that I thought I might pass out. Then suddenly, it took 2 enormous steps backwards. The second creature screamed so loudly that it hurt my ears. I immediately began crying. The second creature ran into the forest, pounding the ground beneath it while moving on 2 legs. The first creature turned and walked back into the woods. I waited until I could no longer hear its footsteps. Then I unzipped the tent, threw Nick over my shoulder, and we ran toward the camper. We woke my aunt and uncle. They had no idea what was happening and told us to go back to sleep. We had slept inside the camper for the next 2 nights. I did not leave the campsite for the remainder of the trip. I don't know what we encountered that night, but I know it was not an ordinary animal. It wasn't human either. It wasn't a bear or another 4-legged creature. The experience has scared me ever since. The energy and the screams still haunt me. Now, the witness later added another unusual detail. Near the campsite was a large rock located at the end of the trail. The rock had previously been covered by an extremely thick layer of moss. The witness described the moss as being soft and dense, almost like a couch cushion. On the final day of the camping trip, all the moss had disappeared. The rock was completely bare. There was no remaining evidence that moss had ever grown in it. The witness stated the rock looked as though it had been cleaned or stripped, though not literally licked. The witness could not provide a theory regarding the creatures, and several aspects of the report stand out. Two entities appeared to communicate through screams and clicking sounds. Both seemed capable of walking or running upright. Their footsteps were heavy enough to create noticeable vibrations. At least one of the creatures approached within approximately 1 foot of the tent, but retreated after the witness shouted. The fact that 13-year-old Nick did not awaken during the screaming and activity is also unusual. The disappearance of the moss may have been unrelated, but its sudden removal added another disturbing element to the encounter. Some listeners may compare the sounds to reported vocalizations attributed to Sasquatch, unknown canids, skinwalkers, or other humanoid entities. However, the available information does not allow definitive identification. The witness's strongest impression was that the creatures were intelligent, coordinated, and deliberately stalking the tent. Now, the creatures near Cloudcroft remained mostly hidden in darkness, but their screams, clicks, and heavy footsteps indicated that something large was moving through the forest. Now, the next encounter involved two trained police officers who followed a mysterious whistle through tall grass near an abandoned school. What they eventually saw appeared childlike, yet it moved on all fours and possessed glowing blue eyes. Now, this incident was reported by a patrol officer working in North Central New Mexico. Now, during the quiet periods in the night shift, the officer and his partner occasionally parked near an abandoned school at the end of a long dirt road. The area allowed them to complete paperwork while remaining relatively undisturbed. Now, the location already had a disturbing history. The officers had observed strange lights moving rapidly through the nearby woods and had witnesses that appeared to be unidentified aerial phenomenon. And had witnessed what appeared to be unidentified aerial phenomena. An unidentified body had also been discovered in the area years earlier. Now, the following encounter occurred in October 2020 at approximately 2 o'clock a.m. So the officer stated, "My partner and I parked our patrol vehicles at the bottom of a long dirt road leading into an abandoned school. We normally did this during slow periods of the night, usually beginning around 1 a.m. We had experienced several strange incidents there, including unusual lights moving through the woods and possible UFO sightings. A body had also been found there years earlier and had never been identified. Now, on this night, we parked our vehicles side by side, facing opposite directions, so the driver's windows aligned. Now, my partner was dispatched to a noise complaint and left the area. I stepped outside to relieve myself. Now, while standing near the patrol car, I heard someone whistling in the woods across the abandoned school grounds. The tree line was approximately 100 yards away. The sound was clearly a tune produced by a human mouth, and it was strangely loud. I assumed it might be a homeless person who had wandered into the area. I returned to my car, rolled up the window, and waited for my partner. He returned approximately 20 minutes later. I told him about the whistling, but he's a skeptic, so we soon began discussing other subjects. But approximately 30 minutes later, he stepped out of his vehicle and walked toward the rear of the patrol car. He had been outside for only about 5 seconds when we heard the whistle again. It was a slow tune that lasted approximately 10 seconds. My partner returned to my window. His face had turned pale. We decided to investigate. We grabbed our flashlights and slowly crossed the field. The grass was waist high. When we reached the middle of the field, we heard the whistle again. This time, it appeared to come from our right near the abandoned school. We directed the flashlights toward the building. Then we saw the grass begin to move. There was no wind, and the grass around us remained still. It looked as though something was crawling through the field. The disturbance moved slowly in a straight line towards us. We began approaching it. By that point, both of us had our hands resting on our firearms. The air was completely still and our breath was visible in the cold. We slowly moved and quietly. When we reached approximately 20 feet, the movement stopped. Then we heard the whistle coming from the exact location where our flashlights were shining. We froze. We were too frightened to speak. It felt like several minutes had passed, though it was probably only a few seconds. I took one step forward. The grass immediately began moving again, but this time it traveled away from us towards the woods. It moved too quickly for us to follow. We stood there and watched the disturbance reach the tree line. We directed both flashlights into the woods. Then we heard the whistle again. This time, it was quiet. The sound came from the same location where the movement had disappeared. We could see several large trees. Then the thing stood up. It looked like a child, but it was not a child. It had humanoid form and illuminated blue eyes. Even though our flashlights were shining directly on it, the figure seemed to remain concealed in the darkness. Before we could speak, it stepped behind a tree and disappeared. We gathered enough courage to follow it, and when we reached the tree, there was nothing there, and there were no footprints. We did not hear leaves or branches moving. It was as though the figure had vanished. Now, we spent the next hour checking reports of missing children, but found nothing. The most disturbing part was realizing that it must have been running on all fours while moving through the grass. Now, there is a children's psychiatric hospital in the town, but there were no reports of escapees. To this day, we cannot explain what we saw. We continued parking in the area afterward, but we never experienced anything similar again. My partner is now a believer. Everyone else in the department thinks we're crazy. Now, this report contains several elements commonly associated with unexplained humanoid reports. The entity used whistling to attract or monitor the officers. It apparently moved on all fours through waist-high grass before standing upright. Its size and proportions reminded the officers of a child, but both immediately understood that it was not an ordinary child. The illuminated blue eyes and the unusual darkness surrounding the figures suggest that it may have reflected or emitted light abnormally. It also disappeared behind a tree without making a sound or leaving any visible tracks. Both witnesses were trained law enforcement officers equipped with flashlights and firearms. Their decision to search for missing child reports demonstrates that they initially considered the conventional explanation. However, no missing child or escaped patient was reported. Now, the experience also changed the skeptical officer's opinion regarding paranormal phenomena. Whatever the officers encountered seemed aware of their presence and may have intentionally drawn them into the field through repeated whistling. Now, that figure near the abandoned school was difficult to see, even with direct flashlight. Our next witness encountered entities that were almost completely transparent. These figures appeared near Holloman Air Force Base, not far from White Sands Missile Range and the Trinity nuclear site. Now, the witness lived in New Mexico between 2015 and 2017 while her then husband was stationed at Holloman Air Force Base. Holloman is located near White Sands Missile Range in an area historically associated with experimental aircraft, missile testing, aerospace research, and persistent UFO rumors. The witness frequently exercised on a running track at the far end of the base. Now, the track was separated from the front line by approximately a half a mile of open desert. One evening, after finishing a run, the witness noticed movement among the desert vegetation. She told me, "I have wanted to tell someone about this incident that occurred sporadically throughout my life, but I have always been afraid of ridicule. Listening to other people's experiences has reassured me that these incidents are not as uncommon as once believed. Now, from 2015 until 2017, my former husband was stationed at Holloman Air Force Base. And at the time, I spent much of my time exercising. My husband would often accompany me to the running track located at the far end of the base. Now, the track was separated from the flight line by approximately half a mile of open desert. One night after finishing my run, I noticed unusual movement in the desert between the track and the flight line. It looked like a large transparent object walking among the plants. I could see the bushes behind it, but they appeared distorted. The transparent figure was moving toward the track. I stood there staring at it, trying to understand what I was seeing. I compared that section of the desert to the surrounding terrain, but it just didn't make sense. Now, my husband ran up to me and said, "Do not look at it, just keep walking." We jogged back home. I asked whether he had seen it. He said that he had, but he did not want to discuss it. Now, during another incident, my husband was away on temporary duty and I was alone in the house. I opened the bedroom blinds to look at a red-winged blackbirds I had left food for the previous night. Now, one of the transparent figures was standing directly outside. This occurred in broad daylight. It frightened me even more because it showed no fear of being observed. It was tall, but not so tall that you couldn't make out it could not have been. It was so tall, but that you could not have been human. It was transparent, but I could still see its outline and body shape. As it moved, the background appeared distorted, almost like viewing something through a wrinkled plastic wrap. It did not attempt to enter the house. It did not go outside. It stood there for some time. She said she didn't go outside and it stood there for some time. I eventually closed the blinds and pretended that I had not seen it. Now, pretending unusual things did not happen had become a way of coping with them. Years later, after we divorced, my former husband completely changed his story. He claimed that nothing had been out there. He also denied seeing other strange things during the years we lived at Hollowman, even though unusual incidents occurred frequently. Sometimes I wonder whether the transparent person was experimental military technology being tested near the base. I have told my siblings and my current partner, but they either cannot understand the experience or believe I imagined it. But I know what I saw. Now, the figure's appearance resembles descriptions sometimes associated with the so-called glimmer beings, cloaked humanoids or entities surrounded by camouflage-like distortion field. Witnesses frequently compare the visual effect to heat shimmer, rippling glass, clear plastic, or fictional camouflage technology portrayed in science fiction films. The first entity moved through the open desert near the flight line. The witness's husband did see it and instructed her not to look at it. His reaction suggests that he either recognized the phenomena or understood that attracting attention to it might be dangerous. The second figure appeared directly outside the witness's home in daylight. It remained visible long enough for the witness to observe its proximate height, outline, movement, and transparency. The entity did not flee after being detected. It simply remained outside until the witness closed the blinds. The possibility of classified military technology cannot be dismissed entirely. Hollowman has a long history of advanced aerospace testing. However, the idea that personnel would test the sophisticated optical camouflage beside residential housing without apparent security or supervision raises additional questions. Reports of transparent or partially cloaked humanoids have occurred far from military installations, and the phenomena may therefore involve several different explanations. Some instances may be technology. Others may involve unknown biological entities, interdimensional manifestations, or perceptual effects that remain poorly understood. Hollowman Air Force Base has long been linked to UFO stories. These include rumors of a meeting between extraterrestrial visitors and President Dwight D. Eisenhower, although no verified documentation confirms this. The base is also associated with the reported alien abduction of Air Force Sergeant Charles L. Moody in 1975. Now, regardless of the surrounding legends and witnesses to encounters deserve consideration on their own merit. She observed a large transparent figure moving near the flight line and later saw a similar entity standing directly outside her home. Now, the transparent beings near Hollowman may have been physical entities using some form of camouflage. Our next witness described an encounter that did not begin with a visible object. Instead, while visiting the extinct volcano as a child, the witness felt her awareness separate from her body and descend into an underground tunnel. Waiting there was a small reptilian being. Now, this experience reportedly occurred in August of 1959. The witness was nearly 11 years old and was traveling with parents toward Colorado Springs. During the trip, her father unexpectedly decided to visit Capulin volcano in northeastern New Mexico. Now, Capulin is an extinct cinder cone volcano rising above the surrounding plains. The witness and her father climbed the volcano and descended into the crater before returning to the visitor center. The witness then urgently needed to use the restroom. She stated, "In August 1959, my parents and I were traveling to Colorado Springs for a vacation. This occurred before my 11th birthday. And for reasons I do not know, my father decided that we'd stop at Mount Capulin, an extinct volcano in northeastern New Mexico. My mother remained at the visitor center while my father and I climbed the side of the volcano and descended into the crater. We eventually returned to the visitor center. I urgently needed to use the restroom. And as I walked through the building, I suddenly felt myself stop in mid-step. I felt my mind lift out of my body and drop directly through the floor. I cannot imagine how far downward I traveled. The descent ended inside an arched tunnel deep underground. The tunnel was illuminated by orange lights. Standing in front of me was a small being that I now believe was reptilian. I estimated it was approximately 4 foot tall. It wore a gray robe with long sleeves and a hood. The only facial features that I could clearly see were oversized, intense, dark eyes. In its left hand, it held an object that today might resemble a tablet computer. I could not determine the exact number of fingers, but it had a thumb. In its right hand, it held a stylus. It looked directly at me and communicated telepathically. It sounded annoyed. It said, "What are you doing here? We are not ready for you yet." Immediately, my awareness traveled upward through the ground and returned to my body. I found myself standing in the visitor center exactly where I had been before the experience. I quickly continued to the restroom and arrived just in time. Since then, I have wondered when the group represented by the word "we" would be ready for me. I later experienced other encounters involving UFO-related entities. One involved a man in black wearing a black warrant officer's uniform and driving a yellow Mini Cooper near a military base in Iceland. He told me to go home and pointed southwest toward North America. It is possible that other entities visited me later, and I just don't remember. Thank you for allowing me to tell my story. Now, this Capulin experience features out-of-body experiences, telepathic contact, underground-based narratives, and possible screen memories. The witness did not physically disappear from the visitor center, at least according to her recollection. Her consciousness appeared to separate from her body and descend into the underground installation. The reptilian entity seemed surprised by her arrival. Its statement, "We are not ready for you yet," implied that the witness was known to the beings and expected at some future time. Now, the device held by the entity resembled technology that wouldn't become familiar to the general public for several decades. In 1959, a thin handheld computer or digital tablet would have had no common cultural reference. The orange lighting and arched tunnel, robe, stylus, and apparent data device remained embedded in the witness's memory. It is impossible to determine whether the witness perceived an actual subterranean location, entered a non-physical environment, experienced spontaneous remote perception, or underwent another form of altered consciousness. The setting remains significant. Volcanic mountains, caves, and underground formations frequently appear in reports of hidden beings and unusual aerial activity. Capulin volcano is an extinct formation with no confirmed connection to underground entities. Nevertheless, the witness believed that her awareness descended beneath the volcano before encountering the robed figure. Now, the Capulin witness described a reptilian being that seemed to know something about her future. Now, the next report returns to a subject of winged creatures. This encounter occurred at Rio Arriba County, where a black figure moved toward two vehicles, spread enormous wings, and exposed a face with yellow eyes and protruding fangs. Now, the witness was 15 years old when the encounter occurred in 2005. She was traveling with her cousin near Tierra Azul in Rio Arriba County in New Mexico. Another vehicle was traveling ahead of them. The witness initially noticed what appeared to be a piece of black trash blowing across the road, and as it moved closer, its form became disturbingly humanoid. The witness tells me, "I wanted to describe something my cousin and I encountered near Tierra Azul in Rio Arriba County. I was 15 years old at the time, so the incident occurred in 2005. There was another vehicle traveling in front of us. Suddenly, a black figure. At first, it looked like a piece of trash blowing in the wind. As it came closer, it began to resemble a runner holding its hands flat in front of its body. However, it didn't look human. The vehicle ahead of us swerved, and during the next several seconds, everything seemed to slow down. The creature was positioned near the right shoulder of the road. It began moving toward our car. Then it jumped and spread its arms. Wings extended from the body. The wingspan appeared approximately as wide as our vehicle from the driver's door to the passenger door. Its face was terrifying because it was not human. It had small yellow eyes and two fangs. Looking back, the face reminds me somewhat of descriptions of the Mothman. It had no visible ears. The face appeared almost blank except for the eyes and fangs. The fangs extended approximately 3 to 6 inches from its mouth. There was a white V-shaped marking on its chest. Its fur was grayish, white, and brown. The coloring reminded me of a deer or an owl. The legs were straight and resembled goat legs. I now understand that the backward jointed appearance is called a hawk. The creature stood approximately 4 to 5 foot tall. The wings seemed to extend from the sides of the rib cage like a glider. They extended beyond the arms. The wings resembled bat wings and were extremely large. Now, the witness later learned that her cousin may have encountered the same creature again several years later. The cousin had traveled to check on a double-wide trailer located off the electrical grid. She immediately felt disturbed and decided to remain inside her van. And according to the account relayed through the witness's aunt, the cousin's young daughter suddenly began screaming and pulling on the driver's headrest. The child repeatedly said, "It's going to get us." Near the trailer, the cousin saw two yellow eyes looking around the side of a tree. The eyes would appear and then hide again. The cousin immediately drove away. Now, the trailer was located approximately 1 mile from the original 2005 sighting. The family believed the same creature may have returned to the area. Now, the original description is unusual because the entity exhibited characteristics of several different animal groups. It had fur resembling that of a deer or owl, legs with visible hocks, a nearly featureless face, yellow eyes, long fangs. The wings resembled that of a bat or other gliding mammal. The wings appeared to extend from the rib cage rather than extend exclusively from the shoulders. The creature initially moved like a runner, then jumped and deployed its wings as it approached the vehicle. The white V-shaped chest marking is especially distinctive. Similar markings have occasionally been described on unknown winged creatures and large anomalous birds. The witness did not report a collision, physical contact, or a vehicle damage. However, the vehicle ahead swerved, suggesting that the occupants may have seen the figure. The later incident involving yellow eyes peering from behind a tree occurred near the original location and may indicate that the being remained in the area for years. Now, the winged creature from Rio Arriba County appeared solid and biological, though its combination of characteristics defies even easy classification. Now, the next report involves a luminous object that moved beside a vehicle approximately moving at 17 miles an hour. The object followed the van near Roswell before stopping instantly in midair. Now, during the summer of 2019, a touring band performed a show in Roswell, New Mexico. One of the musicians had been fascinated by Roswell and UFOs since childhood and was excited to finally visit the city. Now, after the performance, the band began an overnight drive to Tucson, Arizona, where they planned to pick up a friend at the airport. Approximately 45 minutes after leaving Roswell, the witness and the drummer saw a light near the highway. The witness tells me, in the summer of 2019, my band went on a West Coast tour and we performed in Roswell. I was extremely excited because I wanted to visit Roswell since childhood. Now, after exploring the city and playing the show, we began a long overnight drive towards Tucson. I was sitting in the front passenger seat while our drummer drove the first shift. We were traveling on winding back roads with an incredible view of the stars. Approximately 45 minutes outside of Roswell, we approached a bend in the highway. We noticed a light to the left of our van. Now, at first, we assumed it was attached to a barn or another structure on private property. That explanation changed when the light began moving and keeping pace with the van. The highway curved toward the right, so we weren't simply circling a stationary light. There was no access road between us, so it was not another vehicle. The light continued following us while we traveled approximately 75 miles an hour. It moved in and out of the tree line. Sometimes it disappeared behind the trees and then quickly emerged again while effortlessly matching our speed. The light was not extremely bright in conventional sense. It appeared to be a glowing ball approximately 15 foot in diameter. It looked bright, but it did not illuminate the surrounding trees or ground. Now, at one point, it came within approximately 20 feet of the left side of the van. It was simply there. The drummer and I began shouting and asking each other whether we were both seeing it. After following us for approximately 30 seconds, the light stopped instantly. It did not slow down. It simply stopped as though it was stuck in an invisible wall. It remained approximately 10 feet above the ground beside the highway. We continued driving and watched it through the mirrors until the road carried us out of sight. We discussed possible explanation for hours. But we never found one. It's still difficult to believe. Now, that object's ability to travel beside the van at highway speed eliminates many conventional possibilities. A person carrying a light would not have been able to keep pace through an uneven terrain, and a car or motorcycle would have required parallel road, which the witnesses did not observe. Now, the conventional aircraft would not normally weave between trees at low altitude. The object also did not produce a beam, cast significant illumination, or display a visible structure. Its abrupt stop was equally unusual. The light reportedly transitioned from approximately 75 miles an hour to a stationary hover without deceleration. Unexplained luminous spheres have been reported throughout New Mexico. They are sometimes described as orange, white, blue, or red and may appear near roads, deserts, mountains, military facilities, or areas associated with UFO activity. Some could involve atmospheric plasma, ball lightning, misidentified aircraft, distant vehicles, or optical effects. However, close-range pacing incidents are more difficult to explain, and in this case, two witnesses observed the light simultaneously from the front of the van. The object remained close enough for them to estimate its size and altitude. It responded to the van's movements and maintained speed around a bend before stopping instantly. Now, whether the light represented an identified craft or energetic phenomena or an intelligent luminous entity remains unknown. Now, that light outside Roswell followed the vehicle, but did not cause any physical harm. Now, in our final report, it involves a witness stranded near Valles Cadera. While attempting to climb a hill to obtain a cellular signal, the witness heard loud chattering and encountered a 6-foot-tall insectoid with antennae and multiple pincers. Now, the witness worked as a mail carrier in Los Alamos, New Mexico. The delivery route required long drives to remote areas where homes were separated by considerable distances. In February 2023, the witness experienced a flat tire near Valles Cadera National Preserve. It was late afternoon, darkness was approaching, and there was no cellular reception. The witness considered waiting for another vehicle, but worried that assistance might not arrive before nightfall. He decided to hike up the nearby hill in hope of obtaining a signal. So the witness tells me, I'm a mail carrier in Los Alamos. People in the area live far apart, so I spend much of each day driving through the remote terrain to deliver mail. In February 2023, I was near Valles Cadero National Reserve when one of my tires blew out. It was late afternoon and darkness was approaching. The temperature drops quickly at night. Cellular service is unreliable in the area, and I had no signal. My options were to wait for another vehicle or climb the hill and attempt to obtain reception. If I failed to return, the post office would eventually send someone to find me, but that could have taken hours. I did not want to remain alone beside the highway after dark, so I decided to climb the hill. I believed I could reach the top and return before nightfall. Now, when I was approximately halfway up, I stopped to rest and drink some water. While sitting on a rock, I heard a strange sound. It was loud chattering. It reminded me of cicadas from when I lived in the eastern United States. The sound appeared to come from behind a rocky outcropping directly ahead. I did not see another route, so I moved slowly toward it. I stepped on a loose rock and lost my footing. I slid several feet before stopping myself. The chattering immediately stopped. Then I saw something move from behind a boulder. It was a thin insectoid approximately 6 foot tall. It had a head resembling a grasshopper, 2 large antennae extending from its head. A pair of large pincers extended from the upper torso or thorax. A smaller pair of pincers were positioned beneath the larger pair. The creature moved quickly to the left and then to the right and then left again. It stopped approximately 20 foot away. It was horrifying. I didn't know whether to run or remain still, and after looking again at the pincers, I decided to retreat. I slowly backed away and attempted to mimic its side-to-side movements. The creature remained still and watched me. Then my cell phone suddenly began ringing aloud. The creature's antennae immediately snapped upward. It turned and ran quickly down the hillside. I ran the opposite direction. I stumbled and fell several times while descending the hill. I eventually reached the road near my mail truck. I climbed inside and remained there. I hoped the creature would stay away. I briefly saw it again around the hill. I remained locked inside the truck for several hours. I did not dare leave. Eventually, a car arrived and the driver gave me a ride back to town. What did I see? I have heard stories about strange creatures in the New Mexico desert, but this was almost impossible to imagine. I have not told anyone except my girlfriend. So the witness described a creature with distinctly insect-like body plan. It stood approximately 6 foot tall and possessed a grasshopper-shaped head, large antennae, and 2 pairs of pincers. Its movements were rapid, lateral, and deliberate. Now, the being watched the witness but did not immediately attack. When the cell phone rang, its antenna reacted to the sound before it fled down the hill. The ringing phone creates an interesting detail. Although the witness previously had no reception, a call apparently connected during the encounter. The sound may have startled the entity or interfered with its sensory system. The witness later observed the creature moving around the hillside while he remained inside the mail truck. Now, descriptions of large insectoid entities are relatively rare, but have appeared in close encounter accounts, alleged abduction experiences, remote wilderness sightings, and altered state encounters. Some witnesses describe mantis-like beings with triangular heads and elongated limbs. Other reports are of grasshopper-like entities with antennae, segmented bodies, and multiple appendages. Many such encounters occur indoors or aboard alleged unidentified craft. Now, this report is unusual because the witness encountered the insectoid outdoors during daylight in a natural environment. The creature appeared physically adapted to the rocky terrain and moved quickly across the hillside. It is unknown whether the being was biological, extraterrestrial, interdimensional, genetically engineered, or something else entirely. The witness was alone, stranded, and unable to document the creature. Nevertheless, the account contains specific behavioral and anatomical details that are difficult to dismiss as a vague misidentification. The being responded to the witness's movements, monitored him with his antennae, reacted to the ringing phone, and remained in the area after he returned to the truck. Now, the 9 reports examined tonight reveal extraordinary diversity in unexplained phenomena associated with New Mexico. Although those reports differ dramatically, several patterns appear repeatedly. Many of the witnesses were traveling through familiar territory or performing routine activities. They were driving to work, hiking an unknown trail, camping with family, completing police paperwork, exercising, visiting a tourist attraction, touring with a band, or delivering mail. They were not deliberately searching for monsters, portals, aliens, or supernatural manifestations. The phenomena intruded unexpectedly into ordinary life. Several witnesses had described altered perception. The doorway produced saturated colors, heat haze, distortion, deja vu, and an out-of-body sensation. The transparent entities distorted the background like folded plastic. The blue-eyed humanoid remained surrounded by darkness despite the direct light of the flashlights. The Kaplan witness felt her awareness leave her body and travel underground. The Rio Arriba witness experienced a sensation at times slowing as the creature approached the vehicle. There were also indications of intelligence. The Cloudcroft creature communicated through clicking sounds and approached the tent from different directions. The whistling humanoid appeared to lure the officers into the field. The transparent entity stood outside a residence without attempting to hide. The reptilian being communicated telepathically and appeared to recognize the witness. The Roswell light matched the speed and direction of a moving vehicle. The insectoid watched the mail carrier, responded to his movements, and reacted immediately to the ringing phone. New Mexico's geography may also be relevant. The state contains isolated desert, volcanic formations, mountain forests, caverns, military testing grounds, restricted installations, indigenous sacred sites, and vast regions with limited populations. Such environments provide opportunities for unusual natural phenomena, secret technology, unknown animals, clandestine operations, and experiences that challenge our understanding of reality. The state's history of nuclear research, missile development, aerospace experimentation, and alleged UFO activity adds another layer of complexity. However, not every unexplained encounter can be attributed to military testing. Some reports involve entities and circumstances that do not resemble any known technological program. New Mexico has always been a land of contrast. Ancient cultures, modern weapons research exist within the same landscape. Traditional spiritual beliefs coexist with advanced scientific institutions. Remote wilderness surrounds some of the world's most technologically significant facilities. Perhaps that combination makes New Mexico uniquely suited to produce extraordinary stories. Or perhaps the landscape contains mysteries that existed long before the first laboratories, missile ranges, or military bases were constructed. The witnesses in tonight's reports may never receive definitive answers. They can only describe what they experienced and live with the knowledge that something outside the ordinary understanding crossed their path. Were the winged humanoids biological creatures, supernatural manifestations, or entities capable of changing form? Was the doorway to Tortugas Mountain a temporary portal of unexplained perceptual event? What stalked the campers at Cloudcroft? What stood between the trees following the 2 armed officers? Were the transparent figures near Holloman examples of secret optical camouflage technology, or were they non-human entities capable of concealing themselves? Did the young witness of Kaplan Volcano perceive a real underground installation? What was the luminous sphere that followed the musicians outside of Roswell? And what type of intelligence looked through the eyes of an insectoid near Valles Cadera? For now, these questions remain unanswered, but the reports continue. Every year, new witnesses come forward with accounts of strange lights, unidentified creatures, unexplained sounds, and encounters that challenge their understanding of the world. Many remain silent for years because they fear ridicule. Others eventually decide that the need to document the experience outweighs the risk of disbelief. Their testimony provides valuable pieces of a much larger mystery. Now, if you've experienced something unexplained in New Mexico or elsewhere, I encourage you to document every detail you remember. Record the date, time, location, weather, direction, travel, duration of the event, physical characteristics, sounds, odors, lights, conditions, emotional responses, and the names of additional witnesses. Even details that initially seem insignificant may become important when compared with other reports. And you can submit your account to Phantoms and Monsters. Witness confidential and anonymity will be respected when requested. Thank you for joining me for this examination of Unexplained New Mexico. And please subscribe to Phantoms and Monsters Radio, activate notifications, and share this episode with anyone interested in cryptids, UFOs, humanoids, paranormal encounters, and the unexplained. Your support helps us continue to document witness testimony, investigating unusual incidents, and preserving these accounts for future research. So we're going to go ahead and take questions. So please type your question in all caps. I ran a little late tonight, folks, but I guess you don't mind. Okay, I guess Kevin's having problems. Michael, 5468. Okay, Dagnammit. Okay, what do you think the Taos, New Mexico humming sound is? I have no idea. I think it's probably environmental. But I've heard so many different stories from people and witnesses and experiencers that I really don't know what to think of it. It seems to move, when people go to the area where the light is supposedly coming from, or the hums, because there are lights sometimes that show up, or where the hum comes from, there's nothing there. So, but this type of phenomenon is not unusual in desert environments. So, but I have no idea what it is. Michael, 54689, Lon, do you separate folklore from genuine unexplained phenomena? In the case of boys camping outside the camper, do the clicking sounds and screeches make a Wendigo seem plausible? Probably not, because, that was Michelle, I'm sorry. Probably not, because Wendigo sightings are associated with cold weather areas, or areas in the northern part of the United States and up into Canada. Very rarely we get anything associated with Wendigo that far south. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's improbable. As far as what they encountered, I don't know. A Wendigo, for the most part, is considered a human who has some type of mental issue, or some type of possible possession of something, has tendencies of being cannibalistic and other strange things. I don't know what these things were this thing saw, these campers saw. There's not really much you can work on other than what they experienced and what they reported, but it's anybody's guess as far as I'm concerned. Jose Sanchez, based on the sightings, a lot of these winged humanoid beings seem to be related to insects in many body proportions and behaviors. Yeah, I mean, I've investigated these before. Of course, the one up in Hackettstown, New Jersey, on the river by the fishermen and such. I don't know. I mean, for whatever reason, they do very well mimic an insectoid, normally a mantid-like creature or even a grasshopper. I have my own speculation as to what these things really are, and that is, I believe they are reptilians that are metamorphosized. And I hear the cat meowing and what he wants. Hush, bud. Anyway, I think that's what it is. I think it's a hierarchy thing. I think when one goes and another one needs to move up, they kind of metamorphosize into these creatures. So I don't know. But yeah, many times they, first thing people say is, well, it's insectoid, looks like a mantis or it looks like a grasshopper. Dagnammit, what are your thoughts on the Dulce, New Mexico underground installation beneath Archuleta Mesa? I don't know. You heard a lot of stories. Is there really a facility there? I mean, is it a layered facility, like 6, 7, 8 layers? There have been people who have swore that what they saw. And I just don't know. I really don't know. I mean, it's just one of those stories that we just really have no evidence of. It's all conjecture. And I don't believe many times the witnesses are very reliable, though there have been people who have supposedly been either removed or unliving because of it and because of the reporting. I don't know. I have reported on it many times. Occasionally I hear something new, but for the most part, it's usually the same story, but just with a little bit of a change. So I don't know what's really going on there. James Stewart, do you think the insect type creatures that people encounter are extraterrestrial or something else? No, I think they're either extraterrestrial or ultra-terrestrial. I don't think they're indigenous to our Earth plane. They come from somewhere, just like many cryptids and other beings. I just don't believe that they're beings that exist here for a long period of time. I believe they're just moving in and out from wherever they're coming from. Now, we don't understand how that process works. Of course, we may eventually, but it just doesn't add up as far as something that's there all the time. One cat away from crazy midnight. Before he passed, Brenton Salwin reported on black-feathered humanoids in New Mexico. They were dancing on top of a water tower. I saw a little bit of some of those reports. I didn't follow Brandon a whole lot. I know he put a lot of material out there. In fact, a lot of his reports aren't even available anymore for some reason. But that one in particular, maybe I'll look into it, but I haven't really heard a whole lot about it. Channel 0X, to publicly disclosure of compelling evidence such as convincing footage, a body, or even a living specimen. Well, I mean, if it happens, it happens. I mean, are we going to get any type of body? We're not getting much physical evidence of anything that's considered supernatural or supposedly a living being or some other type of entity. Are we going to get a body? Are we going to get more physical evidence at some point? Are we going to be able to find out where these things come from, where they live, how they live, what they eat, etc.? We really just don't know. Michelle, do you think the being the police officers encountered may have been a pukwudgie? A pukwudgie. Hate that name. I don't know. There have been a lot of forms of small humanoids. Is it a pukwudgie particularly? I don't know. Of course, they're well known up into the bridge. What is it? It's the triangle up there in Massachusetts, Bridgewater Triangle. It may be some other type of humanoid. I mean, the Hispanic culture has a lot of different types of humanoids in their culture, as far as duendes and other type of beings. maybe it was something to that effect. The blue eyes kind of get me, but I don't think it's a puckwudgie. Charles Henderson. Charles, good to see you. How many encounters you have come across involving instant consciousness transfer in front of lizard beings right below their feet? I don't think I've ever encountered that or ever heard anything like that. Charles is one of our investigators down in Alabama that we have been looking at for several years, him and Brennan Meadows, the other investigator. That's something else we're going to have to go deep into at some point, because there's a lot of cryptid canine and Bigfoot and possibly winged humanoid activity in central and north central Alabama. So at some point, but I'm glad Charles is in here tonight. Channel 0X, Lon, why is there never any public disclosure of compelling cryptid evidence, such as convincing footage, a body, or even a living specimen? Well, that's the $68,000 question. Why? I think it's because they're not here all the time, and if they do die here, they're taken somewhere else, or there's some other supernatural aspect to them that keep them hidden. Look, I do believe there are cryptids, particularly Bigfoot, that do exist on our Earth plane in certain areas, Pacific Northwest, the Gulf, Florida. But for the most part, I think that phenomena itself is a supernatural being, ultra-terrestrial possibly. And I think that's the main reason why we just don't have enough evidence or even a body. Jose Sanchez, if the cryptid do come from another dimension, would that include an actual planet or something similar? Or would they just move in from empty space? Again, we don't know. There was some evidence early on in our investigation with the winged humanoids. It might have come from another dimension or even a planet. We did have some descriptions of the location where they came from. Now, are all cryptids coming from the same location? We don't know. What's their mechanism for being able to come through some type of conduit or gateway? Are they showing themselves as they actually are? Are they camouflaging themselves? These are questions we just can't answer yet. And that's why we do what we do. That's it. Okay, well, folks, I want to thank you all for coming in, listening, and participating in the chat. If you provided a donation, I truly appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, and share. So until we meet the next time, which will be next Friday, stay aware, trust your instincts, and remember, sometimes the strangest places are not that far away. Have a nice evening, great weekend. See you next Friday. Good night.